Hello everyone, nice to meet you in this episode. But before presenting our guest, let me tell you a short story about why I'm podcasting or I created this area. I'm a talkative person, as you know. So I love to share my experience, my stories with people. But today I will speak less to guide more. Beautiful people, I'm so glad to introduce Mrs. Novelette and Miss Novelette for sure. I'm so glad and I feel privileged to have you today in this episode. Mike is yours to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me a part of this podcast. And my name is Novelette DeMercado. I am a coach. I consider myself a chief possibility director. I look at possibilities with my clients and how they might achieve their well-being. Depending on what they desire, I am there to be part of that co-facilitation of that process. I've been working in the wellness field for over 20 years and recently started my own consulting firm, Beta Coaching and Consulting. And Beta stands for Brave Enough to Act.
Mm-hmm.
Or brave enough to ask the right questions, then act on those questions. So I'm happy to be here today to talk with you and share what I could share.
Okay.
Again, I'm so excited to have you today. So, as we used to define the concept in every episode, so what does giving feedback mean exactly, Mrs. Novelette?
What is giving feedback?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an invitation. I often think there's an invitation for feedback, especially when we're in relationships with other people. So it might be that we wish to learn and amplify our understanding in the space of work. It might be around your performance. So you're getting feedback on how well you're performing in the domain of what you've been hired to do. I think feedback could have a negative connotation in the sense that it could view as less than, you're not up to par, you're less than, you need to get up to speed. What I usually like to invite in the conversation is, what have I done well? What could I do? What could I do differently? And that allows to start with our strengths and then amplify from there.
Okay, great. So, should we care about people's feedback?
It depends. Do we want to care about people's feedback?
Okay, great.
So I'll give an example that's very recent for me. I'm in a writing course, and I had to submit my writing today. And part of it is my colleagues in this course will offer me feedback on what I presented. And the writing course is writing the immigrant story. So the feedback, I said, in my request for feedback, I said, I am still in the process of developing this story.
Okay.
Your comments are welcome.
Okay, great.
So I've invited people to offer their comments.
Okay, you are open
to receive a feedback.
Great. Okay. So, okay, let's take your.
Let me be transparent, though. I am not always open.
Okay,
to
great.
feedback.
Okay, great.
I like to be invited to receive it. So I want to be transparent about that. I'm not always open because it depends on my frame of mind, who it is that's offering me feedback, and how I hold, if I hold what I'm being commented about personally, I might not be ready for the feedback.
Okay. All the people I invited. Okay, great. Great. So let's take your expertise in workplace. So how do we give feedback in the workplace?
Well, that's really tricky. So
Mhm,
most of us work in a hierarchical structure.
mhm,
It's very top down. We don't work in horizontal structure. So our performance is based on metrics of how our employer feels we should be doing, what we
mhm,
should be doing. So in the workplace, I think it needs to be bidirectional. I think we need to invite the employee to share what they felt they did well, where they felt
mhm,
they could improve upon. There's a we build agency,
mhm,
accountability. When it's top down, it could be
mhm,
viewed very punitively. That's a my lens. Not everybody might feel that way. They might view it as, oh, I got
mhm.
some feedbacks. I'm going to improve on that.
Okay,
But I think delivery is really important. How we deliver feedback is
okay.
equally as important as the feedback we're offering.
Mhm,
Exactly. So this point guide us to the useful feedback. It's focused on act, not attitude. What I mean, attacking someone's talent and abilities is not a useful feedback. So what does useful feedback mean?
Well, a useful feedback could be, posing a question to a colleague or employee. How
mhm,
do you see, these are your metrics. You perform this way. How do
mhm,
you see yourself
mhm,
improving upon this? So you're inviting the person to create accountability
mhm,
for their improvement.
mhm,
Um, and should their improvement on a particular skill set or knowledge set require
mhm,
or might benefit from additional skill building, what are the skill building that would allow you to be successful in doing what you're
mhm,
doing?
mhm.
So in that constructive way, you're posing the question to the person, you're getting their feedback, you're getting as well
Mhm,
about how
mhm,
they see themselves improving. It's creating agency and accountability. And if additional skill sets are needed, then that's a resource for the person to go out and figure out how to get those skill sets.
mhm.
So I do believe it's bidirectional and multi-directional. It's not a single, path.
So one thing I wanna mention that useful feedback should be detailed. So before giving feedback to another person, try to recall as much specific information as you can about the action.
Yes, correct. So if we're working, so in the professional world,
Mhm,
we have a job description. Oftentimes, accountability is
mhm,
derived from coming up with, a yearly goal
mhm,
or a quarterly goal. The feedback could be, how have you met those goals? What were the challenges? So there might have been challenges outside of the employee's
mhm,
volition or
mhm,
control. It could have been new software, it could have been new
mhm,
technology, it could have been the pandemic.
mhm. Okay.
So it changes
Mhm,
the shape of the work.
mhm.
So was the individual able to achieve the metrics outlined in their accountability?
Okay.
So if they were not, what were factors outside of the person's control
Mhm,
that created the gap? Or was there a factor for the employee because they didn't have the skill sets to or the
mhm,
mastery to do the work? So that's where the constructive feedback
mhm.
happens, to understand the underlying cause for the gap, if there's a gap.
Absolutely. So, Mrs. Novelette, the another side of giving feedback, it's receiving feedback. So, what's the process of receiving feedback?
I think that's individual to individual. I think it's organizational to organization. We create systems and cultures about how we receive or disseminate information.
Okay.
So I feel, it's something relationally we
Mhm,
determine in the
mhm,
process. I work for an organization. There are systems within the organization for how feedback is offered to me. There is a way in which I could either say I agree with the feedback or I don't. This is how I see that I'm doing X differently than you are stating that's the way I'm doing it. So it allows for this rich and robust conversation and a back and forth. So I think whatever system you're in, because we're all in different systems, whether it's human interaction or organizational interaction, we determine collectively how we want to receive or give feedback, because the way you and I are talking in this podcast, there is a back and forth. Your questions result in a response, and then my response might result in you coming up with a different way to pose another question. So it's very fluid. It's not static. It's a very dynamic process.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about receiving and giving feedback in the general life.
In general life, like say a relationship with my sister or siblings, and they might want to offer me feedback about what they observe. You know, I would think they would want to determine, am I ready to hear that feedback? So there's an invitation to say, Novelette, you know, I have something to share with you. I just wanted to see if you'd be open to me sharing this comment. So it prepares me to receive the information. I might not receive it fully, but it prepares me to listen to what's going to be happening. You know, it's the same way you and a friend, it could be a simple feedback, like you're out with your friends and you might say to your buddy, oh, you know, we're going out, but I don't really like that shirt, doesn't look good on you. And it might be your favorite shirt. So, you know, the feedback is, oh, I don't like your shirt, or it doesn't look good on you. And you might be curious to say, what about my shirt you think doesn't look good? You know, so then you have this conversation. So I think it's, you know, one, determining the person receptivity to the feedback, to invite the conversation, to not be wedded to your feedback, because the other person might not, one, welcome it or even take it to heart or consideration, or to determine, is it the appropriate time to offer the feedback, especially in our personal relationships.
Exactly. So when you want to give a feedback, you should understand the communication of communication styles of others.
Yeah.
Very much so. And I think more so than style, are they receptive to it?
Okay, great.
Are they receptive, or will they be receptive to it? And if not in that moment, might there be a future moment for that conversation?
Okay.
So what's the steps we should follow to give effective feedback, as well as steps for receiving feedback effectively?
So I think if you're giving feedback and the intent is, that is the intent of the conversation, is to at least schedule it in advance so the person knows, set expectation as to what it is that you would be talking over, have the person come prepared with any collateral information to support, especially around work performance, to support their performance. So, you know, and feedback should be done in intervals, you know, so, and feedback is often tied to accountability, you know, work accountability. So you have to create the system for the person to know that this is going to be happening. So to receive the feedback is to create a space of open-mindedness, you know. So it's, you know, being receptive to hear and being receptive to receive is really important on both ends. No one likes to receive feedback that's not complimentary. Yet there are times that we will receive that. And not all bad news is bad news, because it might mean you are able to improve your skills or amplify something that might have been weak, might not have been your strength. So there's opportunity to amplify a quality that was dormant. So I think being open-minded, not being defensive is important. You know, receptivity, I can't speak to that more highly. You know, also coming into the conversations already being proactive to say, these are the things I see that I could improve upon. So it lends the conversation that you've been thinking about what it is that you've been doing. You've been actively engaged in that process. And I would imagine there is there are many other things to be bringing to the process. Yet I think receptivity and open-mindedness are the two that are top of mind for me.
So let's return to the last point. Again, I'm curious about what's the relation between communication styles and giving feedback. How styles affect the feedback?
Well, I don't think communication styles are without understanding a historical context of the person. So that what is the cultural context of the individual? Because I don't feel there's a one approach to communication style. I don't feel that we all need to communicate a particular way to be heard or understood. I think cultural sensitivity is necessary, especially when we're communicating across cultures and across belief systems. So suspending how we think a person should communicate and being again, my favorite word today, being receptive to what you're hearing.
Okay.
And if what you're hearing is not is novel or new to you, to be curious, to investigate what that means for the other person. So this might be an overused cliche, is that there's an openness to the awareness of what's being communicated in the moment. Is to suspend our opinion that a person needs to communicate a certain way. And in the coaching model that I work in, is to have provocative questions to get to the heart of what is being communicated.
Miss Novelette, feedback, sometimes it's a little bit complicated. So in this area, I will be asking about how we can handle the complicated situation when we are giving feedback for who are with difficult personality.
Well, my question would be, who calls it difficult?
Okay.
and you might say, "Oh, Novelette, that was your response was difficult." I think difficult.
So many people difficult.
Yeah.
With difficult personalities. Yeah.
I mean, language is really tricky because what you might consider difficult, someone else might not. So I think the person who is giving the feedback, if they go into the conversation thinking that is a difficult personality or a difficult individual, then the feedback process has already started in a closed loop of sorts, because there is no space to see the person other than difficult. Because if we saw the person as agreeable, what they say to us would not be perceived as difficult. So I think it's the perception that we bring into the conversation, and holding the feedback process and curiosity, being curious about what is emerging for this person, being curious the edges, because there will be edges that you might be touching upon that might be difficult edge, but not necessarily that the process is difficult. The edge might be difficult. How do you enter into the conversation that it is productive for both the person giving the feedback and the person hearing it? Because I think if we enter saying it's going to be difficult, we've already shut down part of our ability to be open to what's being presented to us. And it does not negate the fact that it could be difficult.
Okay.
So I'm not contradicting myself, as I am saying, how are we entering into the process? Are we entering thinking it's going to be difficult? Or are we entering saying there might be difficult edges to this conversation? Something to think about.
Okay.
So what we should care about when we are giving our feedback?
I think in the process of offering feedback is to be clear about our intention. Why are we doing this? And what is the outcome are we hoping to arrive at? You know, are we open to elevating the person to understand a perspective that I'm holding about what's happening? Or are we coming at it from a place of authority where we're imposing on what the person should be doing or could be doing? Do we take away volition from the person? Because, each of us have our own mastery, our own skills. Some skills are more developed than others. Are we giving opportunity for the person to elevate in this process? So I feel intention is really important, and to be aware of the impact of what could happen. The impact might not match up with the intention.
Okay.
Yeah. So be aware of that being, askewed in the process.
Okay. Great.
So quick advice for giving feedback as well as receiving feedback.
Set the stage. Be collaborative.
Okay.
Invite, the person to have agency in the process. So they're also sharing what they're doing, where they feel they could do better. I say try because it's an art, it's a skill. It's not something that we haven't all mastered the process. So it's an art form. Is to be really clear about what your intent and impact is for offering the feedback. Are you trying to create a collaborative process, or are you trying to dictate and or mandate what a person should do? So be clear about that. And I alluded to this earlier. When we're giving feedback across cultural nuances, to be aware how that might be perceived, because it's not a uniformal process. We don't all view feedback in the same way. Some of us are fearful about getting feedback because it might indicate a lacking. I don't have a particular this, or how I present myself might not be honored. So, that's where the intent and impact needs to be looked at. So I do feel it's an art form. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Sadly, this was our last terminal in this episode. Thank you so much, Miss Novelette, for your priceless time. And Mike is yours again to tell people how they can find you on social media and what services you offer for individuals as well as organizations. Thank you.
Well, you could find me on LinkedIn as well as my website, Beta Coaching and Consulting. I offer coaching for both individuals and organizations. The intent of my coaching process is to create ecosystem of well-being. and well-being in a multidimensional perspective. You know, we as a society is only as well as our individual members. So check me out on LinkedIn or on my webpage.
Great, thank you. Beautiful people, thank you so much. Stay close and stay safe. We have so many interesting for you. Bye-bye.